If you're a fan of horror films, you'll love The Forest Hills, an upcoming film that should be released in 2023. One of the highlights of the film, Shelley Duvall, is in it. Fans are eager to see her make a comeback in The Forest Hills at age 73. Join Facts First as we take a look at this legendary actress's return to Hollywood. Shelley Duvall's beginnings. Shelley Duvall was born July 7, 1949 in Houston. She grew up in a middle-class family with her mother, Bobby Ruth Crawford, and father, Robert Richardson Duvall, who isn't the actor Robert Duvall. Shelley was the youngest of 3 children, with 2 older sisters named Scotty and Bobby. Her childhood was full of trauma, as her parents' marriage was turbulent. When she was 13, her parents divorced, and this had a drastic effect on her. Still, she actually became closer to her mother, and it was she who recommended that young Shelley pursue acting as a hobby. Acting became a refuge for Shelley. She was a shy child and struggled to make friends. Books and movies were a way to escape from her loneliness. This also helped her fall in love with storytelling and later served her well when she decided to pursue a career as an actress. During her teens, Shelley was a member of the drama club and a regular performer in school plays. Upon graduating high school, she attended South Texas Junior College. She didn't study acting there, but majored in nutrition. But she'd been bitten by the acting bug and there was no going back. Her true passion was always acting, and she eventually moved to Los Angeles to pursue it. But she didn't have to move to LA to get her big break. Her acting career began in her home state of Texas, but we'll get to that a bit later. Despite her early success, Shelley's personal life was always a bit troubled. She struggled with depression and anxiety, and this led to several hospitalizations throughout her career. She was also known for her eccentric behavior. This included wearing unusual clothing and jewelry and speaking in a high-pitched voice. She was seen as a bit of an enigma and different from other actresses of her generation. Her early life had a curious combination of hardship and creativity. She clearly had talent, and this was recognized early on. But challenges in her personal life also took their toll throughout her career. Shelleys Career. One of Duvall's most notable early roles was in Robert Altman's 1970 film Brewster McCloud, which was filmed in her native Texas. The production crew and director loved Shelley's personality, her quirkiness, and her acting talents. This was the beginning of a successful career working with Robert Altman. She worked with him several more times, including films like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, 3 Women, and Thieves Like Us. With these films, especially her work in 3 Women, she became a recognized star in the indie film circuit. Her small cameo in Annie Hall is also one of her most famous roles. It was once again Robert Altman who made her a star. It was her role as Olive Oyl in the 1980 film Popeye that made her more mainstream. That film starred Robin Williams as Popeye, and it was a critical and commercial success. Her career in the 80s was also great, and she appeared in films like Time Bandits and Roxanne. But her best work in the 1980s, which some would argue was her best role period, was playing Wendy Torrance in The Shining. This was one of the most stressful roles she ever took, and the famous scene where she's waving the bat at her husband Jack, played by Jack Nicholson, literally took 127 takes. This was an exhausting role, and she didn't always have the best experience, but in the end, she gave one of the best performances in a great film. On TV, she was best known for hosting the show Fairy Tale Theater. In the show, she retold classic fairy tales. She was both host and executive producer. She received several Emmy nominations for her work on the show. In the 90s, she continued to work in film and TV, but her career began slowing down. She appeared in smaller roles in films like Suburban Commando and Twilight of the Ice Nymphs. By the time the 2000s rolled around, she decided it was time to hang up her hat and step out of the limelight. Her final role was in the 2002 film Manna from Heaven. Retirement and stepping out of the limelight. We haven't heard much from Shelley Duvall in the past 2 decades, but she did give the occasional interview, and there was one that caused a huge controversy. She gave a controversial interview with Dr. Phil McGraw in 2016. The explosive interview was largely criticized as exploitative and harmful to her mental health. During the interview, Shelley was disheveled and appeared confused. She made several statements that raised concerns about her overall mental state. Many viewers and mental health advocates criticized Dr. Phil for airing the interview. Naturally, tabloids were eager to exploit her troubles for their own profit. Many people called for a boycott of the Dr. Phil show. Dr. Phil defended the interview. He stated he had spoken with Duvall's family and caregivers beforehand, and they had given their consent. He also argued that the interview brought attention to Shelley's struggles with mental illness. He further stated this interview helped her get treatment. Nevertheless, she decided to stay out of the public eye and rarely gave interviews after that. She continued to live in Texas, where her roots were, and where she was miles away from the glitz, glamour, and gloominess of Hollywood. With her last film being released in 2002, it seemed we'd seen the last of Shelley Duvall. But now at 73, she's making her comeback. Take a deep breath before you see her. It came as a shock to most of us when Shelley Duvall retired from the film industry. While her career in the 90s and early 2000s wasn't as prominent as her career in the 70s and 80s, she was still working regularly and doing great work. It was actually in her interview with Dr. Phil when Shelley revealed why she suddenly decided to retire. One of the main reasons was the stress and constant pressure that her work brought her. The work was demanding and had long hours, and she couldn't stand it. To top it off, the constant attention from the press was also difficult, and this caused her to feel anxiety and made her mental health suffer. During that interview, she spoke several times about her mental health, and this was one of the first times when an actor or actress spoke about their mental health issues. Nevertheless, Shelley remains a respected figure in Hollywood and is loved by aspiring actresses, filmmakers, and cinephiles alike. Her unique talent and offbeat personality made her an unforgettable presence on screen. Her performances in films like The Shining and Popeye are still popular to this day. After the success of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, lead actress Shelley Duvall seemed as if she was poised for a long and illustrious career in Hollywood. But her star status started decreasing after her turn in that classic film, leading to the actress officially retiring around the turn of the century. Part of Shelley's reasoning for leaving Hollywood behind was the traumatic experiences she endured while filming The Shining. Join Factsverse as Shelley Duvall reveals why she left Hollywood. Shelley Duvall was born in Fort Worth, Texas on July 7, 1949. She was the first child of a real estate broker and a lawyer. The couple's remaining children were all boys, of which they had 3. When Shelley was 5, her family settled in Houston. Young Shelley always had artistic tendencies, but aspired to be a scientist. When she graduated high school in 1967, she worked at Foley's department store selling cosmetics while attending South Texas Junior College. She majored in nutrition. Shelley has claimed she might have been a microbiologist if she hadn't become an actress. But fate had other plans. Her introduction to show business came when she met director Robert Altman at a party. Robert was shooting on location in Texas and was struck by Shelley's charming presence and unique physical appearance. He convinced her to appear in the film he was making, which was 1970's Brewster McCloud. Shelley's turn in the film was a success, and Robert subsequently cast her in several more of his features, including Thieves Like Us, Nashville, and 3 Women. 1977's Annie Hall saw Shelley take her first role in a feature that wasn't helmed by Robert Altman. Annie Hall was the brainchild of Woody Allen. Woody also starred in it alongside Diane Keaton. Another player in the film was pop singer Paul Simon, whom Shelley began dating after the two met during filming. They dated for about 2 years, ending their relationship in 1978. Shelley's role in Annie Hall further cemented her as a rising star, and it wasn't long before she was cast as the lead in Stanley Kubrick's upcoming adaptation of the hit Stephen King novel The Shining. Due to Stanley's stringent nature, filming of The Shining was a bit more intensive than Shelley was used to. Although Robert Altman was certainly a skilled filmmaker, he was never quite as meticulous as Stanley was. The filming of The Shining led to some of the most notorious examples of Stanley being overbearing on his actors, though Shelley has claimed the director was nothing but kind to her. Still, the amount of work she was forced to do was incredibly demanding, and the work itself required Shelley to immerse herself in negative emotions that caused stress over time. Filming lasted for around a year, with some scenes requiring over 100 takes. Such scenes included the infamous scene where Shelley's character is brandishing a baseball bat at Jack Nicholson. The filming of The Shining was so stressful for Shelley that the actress claimed chunks of her hair were falling out during filming. This is documented in Making The Shining, a short feature filmed by Stanley Kubrick's daughter during The Shining's production. The trauma of filming The Shining could have potentially been worth it if the initial reception of the film was more positive, but it was met with incredibly mixed reviews. Although the film has since become regarded as a legitimate classic ahead of its time, both critics and audiences originally derided it. One of the few critics who enjoyed The Shining at the time of its release was Roger Ebert. Roger was fascinated with the film. In particular, he appreciated Shelley Duvall's performance. Roger's fascination with her performance led him to track her down for an interview, which led to Shelley giving the public its first hint that her experience on the film hadn't been entirely pleasant. Still, Shelley continued working for many years after filming The Shining, including reuniting with Robert Altman for 1980's Popeye. Shelley had been cast in Popeye while filming The Shining. The film was a passion project for Altman, as he'd always been a huge fan of the character. While Robin Williams had been cast in the titular role, Shelley was cast as Olive Oyl. Robert didn't even need to test her for the part. He knew she'd be perfect. Roger went on to further his praises for Shelley in his review of the film, saying Olive Oyl was the role the actress had been born to play. Sadly, the film wasn't much more successful than The Shining had been. Shelley's career never quite recovered from these two flops, even though the directors did. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like, and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Throughout the 80s, Shelley Duvall created and produced a children's TV series for Showtime called Fairy Tale Theater. 27 episodes of the show were produced over 6 seasons. Francis Ford Coppola and Tim Burton were among the directors whose talents were tapped for the show. Shelley featured in the intro of each episode and even acted in a few. The show was a success, marking Shelley's first foray into children's television. She went on to work with the Disney Channel, where she met boyfriend Dan Gilroy in 1989. The two are still together today. In 1994, Shelley and Dan were living in LA when the infamous Northridge earthquake struck. It caused extreme damage to their home, and the couple was unsure how they'd pay for it. In the midst of dealing with this situation, Shelley went to Texas to film Steven Soderbergh's The Underneath. There, she got the idea to give up on the reconstruction of their home and move back to Texas. The couple moved to the city of Blanco. 8 years after moving to Texas with Dan, Shelley officially retired from her work as an actress. Her last role was in the 2002 feature Manna from Heaven. In the film, Shelley played a detective. She had begun painting soon after moving to Texas and pursued the hobby further after her retirement. The actress remained relatively elusive after her retirement, up until a now notorious 2016 appearance on Dr. Phil revived the public's interest in the former star. The interview Shelley gave focused on the numerous reasons she decided to retire. Unsurprisingly, she touched upon the incidents she endured while filming The Shining. While these issues were innocent on their own, the troubling nature of the interview came from Shelley's rambling train of thought. She seemed to freely transition into unrelated tangents, and Dr. Phil seemed as if he was exploiting her mental state for views. The interview took a dark turn when Shelley brought up the fact that she was suffering from untreated mental illness, prompting Dr. Phil to extend an offer to help check her into a facility for treatment. Shelley declined. Many of Shelley's fans and former peers were worried about the actress after seeing this appearance, but it has since become clear her appearance during the interview wasn't emblematic of her overall state of being. It seemed as if Shelley is doing much better for herself than that 2016 appearance, and she's made further public appearances to help clear the air about her seemingly unhealthy mental state. Shelley was offered the chance to give an interview to The Hollywood Reporter in an attempt to help clear the damage done by her appearance on Dr. Phil. The ensuing interview painted the actress in a much more positive light. Still, it remains unlikely that the 72-year-old actress would ever be interested in stepping back into the spotlight. Even after all these years, her experience on the set of The Shining still haunts her. Filming of the classic horror movie was said to have required 16-hour days, 6 days a week, and most scenes required Shelley to be screaming and crying as if she were at her wit's end. She was never quite comfortable with giving her all to a film after this traumatic experience. She still holds no grudge against Stanley Kubrick for what he apparently put her through, though she's shared she hasn't watched the film in many years.